Ethan Langford had everything a man could wish for. He lived in a house that touched the clouds, owned cars that shone brighter than the sun, and had people working for him who treated his words as law. To the world, he was a symbol of success, a man who turned ideas into gold. But to those who knew him closely, Ethan was a man whose heart belonged completely to one person, his little daughter, Amelia. Amelia was 6 years old and the light of his life. She had curly brown hair that bounced every time she ran, and a laugh that could make even the coldest heart melt. Her favorite game was to run through the garden, chasing butterflies while Ethan sat on the bench pretending to read the newspaper, but never taking his eyes off her. Every evening they would have ice cream together in the kitchen. It didn't matter how busy Ethan's day had been. When it came to Amelia, he always made time. Ethan's wife had passed away when Amelia was just a baby. From that day on, he promised himself he would fill her world with love so she would never feel the absence of a mother. He was both her father and her best friend. He would braid her hair clumsily in the mornings, pack her school bag, and kiss her forehead before sending her off. People admired how, despite his wealth and fame, he lived a simple life when it came to his daughter. But fate, as it often does, had its own cruel plans. It was a bright Saturday morning when everything changed. Ethan and Amelia were preparing for a trip to the countryside. Amelia loved animals, and he had promised to take her to a nearby farm where she could feed the lambs. She woke up early, humming to herself as she packed her small pink backpack with her favorite toys. Ethan smiled as he watched her. "Ready to go, my princess?" he asked. She nodded eagerly, holding his hand as they stepped out of the house. Outside, the chauffeur waited with the car door open. As they drove away, Amelia pressed her face against the window, pointing at every colorful flower and waving at strangers on the road. Ethan chuckled at her excitement. To him, her laughter was the sound of life itself. When they reached a small cafe on the way, Ethan decided to stop for breakfast. It was a cozy place, filled with the smell of coffee and fresh bread. He ordered pancakes for Amelia and tea for himself. She sat on the chair, swinging her legs, playing with her spoon. "Daddy, can we buy some flowers for Mommy's picture later?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, touched by her words. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll get the prettiest ones." After breakfast, he paid the bill and turned to pick up Amelia's backpack. But when he looked up again, the chair was empty. His heart froze. He called her name once, then again, louder this time. "Amelia!" People in the cafe looked up, surprised by his sudden panic. He ran outside, scanning the busy street. The cars, the people, the noise. She was nowhere to be seen. In that single moment, the world around him collapsed. Within minutes, the police were called. Officers searched every corner, every alley. They questioned everyone who had been in the cafe, but no one had seen where the little girl went. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Ethan couldn't breathe. His legs felt weak and his hands shook uncontrollably. He kept saying her name over and over again, as if repeating it would bring her back. Hours passed, then days. News channels covered the story everywhere. Billionaire's daughter missing. The media followed Ethan's every move, cameras flashing in his face as he pleaded for information. He offered a massive reward for anyone who could help find her. Helicopters searched from above, and teams went from city to city, following every lead. But nothing came. Every night Ethan sat in Amelia's room. Her toys were still on the shelf, her drawings taped to the wall. Her favorite stuffed bunny sat on her pillow, waiting for her. He would stare at it for hours, unable to believe that she wasn't there. He would whisper, "Daddy's coming for you, princess," even though deep down fear had started to eat away at hope. Weeks turned into months. The police did everything they could, but the case grew colder with each passing day. Ethan stopped going to his office. His company began to run without him, managed by others who rarely saw him anymore. The once lively man became quiet, his eyes dull and tired. He stopped smiling, stopped eating, and barely spoke to anyone. The mansion that once echoed with laughter became silent as a graveyard. Friends tried to comfort him, but there was little anyone could say. How do you console a father who lost his only child? Money couldn't buy back his happiness. Fame couldn't fill the empty chair at the dinner table. Every time he saw a child playing in the park, his chest ached with unbearable pain. One night, Ethan walked through the city streets alone, with a scarf pulled over his head so people wouldn't recognize him. It had been almost a year since Amelia disappeared, and the world had slowly moved on. But for him, time had stopped the moment she was taken. He ended up near the cafe, the same one where she was last seen. He stood there for a long time, staring at the entrance. The lights were still the same, the smell of coffee still drifted through the air, and people still laughed inside. But for him, that place was a wound that would never heal. He remembered the sound of her laughter echoing in his ears, her small hand holding his, her voice calling him Daddy. The memory hit him so hard he could barely stand. He leaned against the wall, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in his life, the man who once owned everything felt like he owned nothing at all. After that night, Ethan withdrew completely. He rarely left his mansion. He lived surrounded by silence and memories. The maids would sometimes hear him talking to Amelia's photo as if she were still there. "Did you have fun at school today?" he would whisper, his eyes wet. "I hope you're safe, my little girl." Years went by, and though the world forgot, Ethan never did. The posters faded, the reporters stopped calling, and even the police had no new answers. But inside him, the search never ended. Every night before sleeping, he looked out the window and whispered a prayer, not for riches or success, but for a miracle. Those who worked for him said he became softer after Amelia's loss. He donated huge amounts of money to orphanages and children's hospitals, but he never took credit. "If I can help one child smile again," he once said quietly to his assistant, "maybe it will make her proud of me." Despite his wealth, he lived like a shadow. He didn't attend parties or business meetings anymore. His world had shrunk to one room, Amelia's room, where he spent most of his time. Sometimes he would sit by her bed, holding her photo close to his chest. "I should have protected you," he whispered, blaming himself every single day. The people around him started to worry. His closest friend, a man who had known him since college, tried to convince him to see a doctor. But Ethan refused. "Doctors can't heal what's missing," he said softly. My heart went with her. Still, a small, fragile hope lived inside him. Every time the phone rang, he wished it would be someone with good news. Every time he heard about a lost child found somewhere, he followed the story, praying that somehow it might be Amelia. But each time, disappointment followed. And with every disappointment, his hope grew thinner. But even in his darkest days, Ethan couldn't let go of his promise. Every morning, he placed fresh flowers beside Amelia's photograph and said, "Daddy's still waiting, sweetheart." It was a ritual that gave him strength, even if it broke him a little more each day. Then one morning, as he looked out at the sunrise from his study, something inside him stirred. It was faint, like a whisper. For the first time in years, he felt that perhaps she wasn't gone. Not completely. Maybe somewhere out there his daughter was alive, waiting for him to find her. He didn't know why he felt it, but the feeling wouldn't leave him. That tiny spark of hope became the only thing that kept him breathing. He decided that day to reopen the search, even if everyone told him it was useless. "A father never stops looking for his child," he said quietly, his voice trembling with emotion. Ethan didn't know that somewhere, far from his world of marble floors and city lights, destiny was already moving. That a young girl with nothing to her name would soon step into his life, bringing with her a light he thought he had lost forever. And though he didn't know it yet, the story of his pain was only the beginning, because sometimes the most broken hearts are the ones chosen to witness miracles. Far away from the noise of the city and its tall glass buildings, in a quiet countryside town surrounded by dusty roads and small houses, lived a young woman named Clara Evans. She was 19, but her life had already seen more struggle than most people twice her age. She lived in a tiny one-room house made of wood and tin, at the edge of town where the wind whistled through the cracks at night. Clara had lost her mother a few years earlier. Her father had left when she was a child, and she had never heard from him again. After her mother passed, Clara was left completely alone in the world. The neighbors helped when they could, giving her food, sharing clothes, or letting her stay with them when the rain leaked through her roof. But she never liked being a burden, so she worked, harder than anyone else her age. Every morning before sunrise, she walked to the bakery, where she cleaned the floors and washed dishes. After that, she helped at the market, carrying crates or sweeping stalls for a few coins. In the evenings, she worked at a small food stall, serving hot soup to tired workers. Some nights she returned home so exhausted that she didn't even eat. She would just lie down on her small bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, whispering, "Just one more day, Mom. I'll make it through one more day." What kept Clara going was her heart. She was poor, but she was kind. She never ignored someone in need. There was an old woman named Mrs. Turner who lived down the road, too weak to walk. Clara brought her food every evening, even when she barely had enough for herself. "You need it more than I do," she would say with a smile. The old woman often told her, "You're a light in a dark world, child. Don't ever let that heart of yours harden." Clara smiled but never believed it. She often felt invisible, like no one in the world even noticed she existed. Life went on day after day, simple and silent, until one night changed everything. It was late and most shops in the market had already closed. The air was cool and the sound of crickets filled the street. Clara was walking home, carrying a small bag of bread she had bought with her last few coins. The street was dimly lit by a few old lamps and the wind blew dust across her path. As she turned a corner, she heard a faint sound, a whimper, soft but desperate. She stopped and looked around. At first she thought it was a stray animal, but then she heard it again on a small cry like that of a child. Her heart jumped. She followed the sound toward the old bus stop, where shadows stretched long under the flickering light, and there, sitting on the cold ground, was a little girl. Her face was dirty, her clothes torn, and her hair tangled. She hugged a stuffed bunny tightly to her chest. Clara knelt down slowly. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, not wanting to scare her. "Are you okay? Where's your mother?" The girl didn't answer. She just looked up with wide, frightened eyes. Her lips trembled as she whispered one word. "Amelia." The name made Clara pause. "Amelia, is that your name?" The child nodded weakly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I want to go home," she said in a trembling voice. Clara's heart broke instantly. She took off her scarf and wrapped it around the child's shoulders. "It's okay, you're safe now," she said gently. "We'll figure this out." She looked around, but the street was empty. No parents, no cars, no signs of anyone searching. Whoever this child was, she was alone, lost and scared in a town where no one would think to look for her. Clara took her hand. "Come with me, Amelia. I'll take care of you tonight, and tomorrow we'll find your home." The girl hesitated, but then nodded. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Clara carried her home, even though her arms ached from fatigue. The child fell asleep on her shoulder before they reached the door. Inside, Clara laid her on the bed, covered her with a blanket, and gave her a glass of water when she woke. "You're very brave," Clara said softly. "Everything will be fine." For the next few days, Clara tried to learn more. Amelia spoke very little, only saying that some bad men had taken her from her father a long time ago. She didn't know where she was now or how she had escaped. She said she ran when the men started arguing one night, and she had been walking for days before Clara found her. Clara didn't know what to do. She didn't have a phone, and the nearest police station was in another town. Besides, she was afraid. Afraid that if the wrong people found out, the men who had taken Amelia might come back. The girl was clearly in danger, and Clara wasn't about to let anyone hurt her again. She made a plan. For now, Amelia would stay hidden with her. Clara would feed her, keep her safe, and find a way to get her back to her family. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all she could think of. The little house became warmer with Amelia there. For the first time in years, Clara had someone to talk to. She made small meals from what she had, soup, bread, and sometimes boiled potatoes, and they would sit by the small window while Amelia told her stories about her daddy, who used to make her pancakes every morning. Every time she spoke about him, Clara could see the love in her eyes. One evening, Clara was washing clothes outside when she noticed two men walking down the road, asking questions at each house. Her heart raced. She couldn't hear everything, but she caught bits and pieces. Little girl, reward, and last seen nearby. Fear gripped her chest. Were they the ones Amelia had escaped from? Or people pretending to help? She rushed inside, closed the door, and locked it. Amelia looked at her with wide eyes. "What's wrong?" Clara took her hand. "We have to be quiet, okay? Just for a little while." She blew out the lamp and held her breath as footsteps passed outside. The men stopped near her window. She could hear them murmuring. Then, after what felt like hours, they moved on. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the door, clutching a kitchen knife, listening to every sound. She realized something. Helping this child was going to cost her more than just effort. It could cost her life. But when she looked at Amelia sleeping peacefully, she knew she couldn't turn away. She had already lost her mother. She wasn't about to let another child lose everything too. The next morning, Clara decided to act. She sold her only valuable thing, a silver locket that had belonged to her mother. It was the last piece of her past, but she didn't hesitate. She used the money to buy food, a small blanket, and 2 bus tickets. She didn't know exactly where to go, only that she had to take Amelia somewhere safer. As the bus rolled away from the town, Clara held Amelia close. The girl rested her head on Clara's shoulder, whispering, "You're like my mommy." The words brought tears to Clara's eyes. She wasn't anyone's mother, but at that moment she felt the same fierce love and responsibility a mother would. She brushed the child's hair gently and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll get you home." They traveled from one small town to another, avoiding big cities and crowded places. Clara was always alert, always watching. She could feel that someone might still be looking for Amelia. The journey was hard, sleeping in cheap inns, sometimes outside, and eating very little. But Amelia's smile kept her going. Every time the girl laughed or hugged her, the world seemed a little less heavy. Days turned into weeks. They reached a small coastal town where Clara found temporary work cleaning rooms at a small motel. She used her earnings to keep Amelia safe and fed. At night, she would look out the window and whisper prayers. "Please, God, help me find her family. Help me take her home." She didn't know who Amelia really was. She didn't know that far away, in a mansion filled with silence, a father still cried for the same child she now held. She didn't know that the girl whose hand she held every night was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country. To Clara, she was just a little girl who needed love. And yet, deep inside, she sometimes felt that Amelia wasn't an ordinary child. There was something about her, the way she spoke, the way she described her old home, the name Langford she once murmured in her sleep, that made Clara wonder. She tried not to think too much about it, focusing instead on keeping her safe. But the world is small, and fate has strange ways of connecting people. Somewhere in that same country, Ethan Langford was still searching, his hope barely alive. And here, miles away, a girl with nothing was unknowingly holding the answer to his prayers. Clara didn't know it yet, but her quiet courage was about to set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Clara woke up early as the first light of dawn touched the window. The sound of waves outside the small coastal motel mixed with the soft breathing of the little girl still asleep beside her. Amelia was curled up under the thin blanket, holding her stuffed bunny tightly against her chest. For a moment, Clara just sat there watching her. There was something peaceful about seeing her safe like this. It gave Clara a strange kind of comfort, like maybe she was doing something right in her life for once. After quietly getting dressed, she went out to sweep the hallway. The motel owner, a kind old man who paid her a few coins each week, greeted her with a nod. He didn't ask questions about the child who stayed with her. Maybe he guessed that Clara was protecting someone. Maybe he saw something in her eyes that told him not to interfere. When she finished cleaning, Clara bought a piece of bread from the shop next door and brought it back to the room. Amelia woke up with a sleepy smile. "Good morning," she said softly, rubbing her eyes. "Did you sleep well?" Clara asked. The girl nodded, chewing the bread slowly. "I dreamed about Daddy," she said suddenly. "He was holding my hand." Clara's chest tightened. "That's a good dream," she replied gently, brushing the child's hair from her face. "Maybe dreams like that mean he's thinking about you too." Amelia smiled faintly. "I think he misses me." Clara couldn't find the right words. Deep down, she wished she could tell Amelia the truth, that soon she would find her father again. But she didn't even know where to start. All she knew was that the name Amelia Langford still lingered in her mind like a whisper. She had once seen that name years ago in a newspaper about a missing girl, but she wasn't sure if it was the same child. Could it be? If it was true, then the little girl sitting in front of her wasn't just any lost child. She was the daughter of a man whose story had once shaken the whole country. That thought frightened Clara more than it comforted her. If those who had taken Amelia before were still looking for her, they might never stop. And if they discovered Clara was the one who had her, what would they do? That night she couldn't sleep. The fear of being found kept her awake. She listened to the ocean waves crash against the rocks outside, trying to calm her thoughts. But then, sometime after midnight, she heard voices, 2 men speaking in low tones near the entrance of the motel. She couldn't make out their words, but something about the way they spoke made her uneasy. Carefully, she got up, peeked through the curtain, and saw them standing near a car. One of them held a photograph. Her heart dropped. The light from the street lamp glinted off the paper, and for a second she thought she saw Amelia's face on it. Clara quickly pulled the curtain shut. Her hands trembled. She turned and saw Amelia still sleeping soundly. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. She knew she couldn't stay there any longer. She packed their few belongings into a small bag, a change of clothes, a piece of bread, a bottle of water, and the bunny that Amelia refused to part with. Then she gently woke her up. "Sweetheart, we have to go," she said softly. Amelia blinked, confused. "Now it's dark." "I know," Clara whispered. "But we have to go somewhere safer." She didn't tell her why. She didn't want to scare her. Within minutes, they were out the back door, moving quietly along the narrow road behind the motel. The wind was cold, and the sound of the sea followed them like a ghost. Clara's heart pounded as they slipped through the shadows. She looked back once and saw the men knocking on the motel door. They walked for miles that night. Clara carried Amelia part of the way when her little legs grew tired. By sunrise, they reached a small fishing village. Clara found shelter in an abandoned boat shed near the shore. It was dusty and smelled of salt, but it would do for now. She spread out her scarf and told Amelia to rest. The girl fell asleep almost instantly, her head resting on Clara's lap. Clara sat there staring out at the water, her thoughts heavy. She knew she couldn't keep running forever. If the men were really searching for Amelia, they would eventually find her. And if they did, there was no telling what might happen. She had to find a way to get the girl home safely, not just hide her. But how? She didn't have a phone or enough money to travel far, and even if she did reach the city, how could she possibly contact someone as powerful as the Langfords? For hours she sat there thinking. Then she remembered something she had once overheard at the market. A local newspaper office in the next town that often published missing person stories. Maybe if she could send them a message, someone would recognize Amelia. It was a risk, but it was the only plan she had. That evening, after making sure Amelia was safe and asleep, Clara borrowed a piece of paper from a fisherman's son and began to write. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. She wrote, "I found a young girl named Amelia. She says she was taken from her father a long time ago. Please, if anyone knows a man named Langford who lost his child, tell him she is safe. She is with someone who will protect her until she can be home again." She didn't sign her name. She only wrote the town name in a small mark, hoping it would be enough for someone to trace. The next morning, she gave the note to a bus driver heading toward the city and asked him to deliver it to the newspaper office. "Please," she said quietly. "It's important." The man looked at her strangely but agreed. When she returned to the shed, Amelia was sitting by the door, drawing lines in the sand with a stick. "Where did you go?" she asked. "I was scared you'd leave me." Clara knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. "I'd never leave you, my dear," she whispered. Never. Days passed slowly after that. The village was peaceful, and for a while things felt normal again. Clara started helping at a small fish stall in exchange for food. Amelia spent her time playing by the water, collecting shells and humming little songs. Sometimes Clara would watch her and wonder how someone so small could still smile after all she had been through. There was something strong about that child, a quiet bravery that reminded Clara of her own mother. But one afternoon, everything changed again. Clara had gone to the small shop to buy bread when she noticed a newspaper lying on the counter. The front page showed a picture of a man, his face serious, his eyes sad. The headline read, "Billionaire Ethan Langford makes public plea after anonymous letter claims missing daughter is alive." Her heart stopped. She picked up the paper, her hands shaking. There, right below the headline, was a photo of Amelia as a little girl smiling in a pink dress. There was no doubt now. It was her, the lost child the whole country had once searched for. The child whose father had never stopped hoping. Clara paid for the paper and rushed back to the shed. "Amelia?" she called softly as she entered. The little girl ran to her. "Look," Clara said, showing her the picture. "Do you know this man?" Amelia's eyes widened. "That's my daddy," she whispered. "That's him." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She knelt down and took Amelia's hands. "Sweetheart, we're going to find him," she said. "You're going home." That night, Clara couldn't stop crying. She was happy, but also scared. If the newspaper had printed her message, then others had seen it too, including the men who had been searching for Amelia. They might already be on their way. She knew she had to move quickly before it was too late. The next morning she packed their bag again. "We're going to the city," she told Amelia. "It might be a long trip, but I promise we'll get there." They boarded an old bus heading toward the main highway. As it drove away, Clara looked out the window, clutching the bag tightly. Every time the bus slowed, her heart raced, afraid they were being followed. She didn't know what waited for them ahead, danger or salvation, but she was willing to risk everything. As they approached the city, the skyline rose in the distance. Amelia pressed her face to the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's so big," she whispered. "Do you think Daddy can see us?" Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe he's waiting right now." She didn't know that miles away, Ethan Langford was indeed waiting, sitting by his window, praying that the words from that anonymous letter were true. He didn't know the name of the person who had written it, but he whispered a thank you to her every night. The letter had given him hope again. As the bus rolled into the city, Clara held Amelia's hand tightly. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The long road of fear and running was almost over. She had no idea that before the sun set, both her life and Amelia's would change forever. The bus reached the city just as the sun began to rise. The tall buildings glowed orange in the early light, and the streets slowly came alive with people hurrying to work. Clara held Amelia's hand tightly as they stepped off. The noise, the cars, the crowd, and it was all too much after weeks of quiet towns and small roads. Amelia clung to her, scared but trusting. "It's okay," Clara whispered softly. "I've got you. We'll be fine." She looked around, unsure where to go next. The only clue she had was the name Langford, and that was enough. Somewhere in this big city lived the man who had been waiting for years to see his daughter again. But how could a girl like Clara, with no money or connections, possibly reach a man like him? Her shoes were worn out and her clothes were dusty from travel. She didn't belong in a place like this. Still, she couldn't give up now, not after coming so far. She needed to find a way to reach Ethan Langford, no matter how impossible it seemed. After walking for hours, they reached the main city square. Newspapers were displayed on stands everywhere. One of them showed a familiar photo, Ethan Langford's face beside the same headline. "Father offers reward and pleads for contact from anonymous letter writer." Clara's heart pounded as she read. She turned to Amelia. "Sweetheart, he's been waiting for you," she said softly. Amelia looked up at her with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can we go to him now?" Clara bit her lip. "We'll try." She went to a phone booth at the corner and asked a passing woman for change. The woman looked suspicious but handed her a few coins. Clara found the number of the Langford Foundation printed in the newspaper. Her hands shook as she dialed. A man's voice answered. "Langford Foundation. How may I help you?" Clara swallowed hard. "I need to speak to Mr. Langford," she said. "It's about his daughter." There was silence on the line. "Ma'am, many people call with false claims." "Can you tell me who you are?" Clara hesitated. "My name doesn't matter," she said. "But the little girl with me, and her name is Amelia. She says she's his daughter." The man's voice changed immediately. "Where are you right now?" Clara looked around nervously. "At the main square, near the fountain." "Please stay there," the man said quickly. "Don't go anywhere. We'll send someone right away." Clara hung up, her heart racing. She looked at Amelia. "We're going to meet your father soon," she whispered. Amelia's eyes lit up. "Really?" Clara nodded, smiling faintly. "Really?" They sat on the edge of the fountain, waiting. Minutes passed like hours. The crowd bustled around them, people talking, cars honking, pigeons fluttering. But all Clara could hear was the pounding of her heart. What if this was another trap? What if the wrong people had answered that call? The thought made her stomach twist with fear. After almost half an hour, a black car pulled up nearby. Two men stepped out, both wearing suits. They looked around until one of them spotted Clara and Amelia. He approached slowly. "Miss," he said gently, "did you make a call to Mr. Langford's office?" Clara stood, holding Amelia close. "Yes, is he here?" The man shook his head. "He's on his way. Please, come with us. You're safe now." Clara hesitated, unsure if she should trust them, but when Amelia looked up at her and said softly, "I think Daddy sent them," she felt something inside her ease. Maybe this was finally the moment they had been waiting for. They got into the car. The city streets flashed by outside the window. Amelia kept her face pressed against the glass, watching in awe. "It's so big," she whispered. Clara smiled weakly. "You'll see your home soon," she said, though her heart still raced with worry. After nearly an hour, the car turned into a long driveway lined with tall trees. At the end stood a grand house, the kind Clara had only seen in pictures. The gate opened slowly and the car stopped in front of the main entrance. A man stood waiting at the top of the steps. He looked older than in the newspaper photo, his face lined with years of pain and sleepless nights. But when his eyes fell on the little girl stepping out of the car, everything in him changed. His breath caught, his hands trembled, and for a moment he couldn't move. "Amelia," he whispered. The girl froze, her small face lighting up. "Daddy!" she cried, running toward him. Ethan fell to his knees and opened his arms wide. She threw herself into his embrace, and the sound that came from him was not a cry. It was something deeper, something that came from the heart of a man who had lived in darkness for too long. He held her tight, as if he never wanted to let go again. "My baby," he kept saying through his tears. "My little girl." Clara stood a few steps away, her own eyes filled with tears. The moment was so pure, so powerful, she could barely breathe. She had imagined it many times during their journey, but seeing it happen in front of her, it was something she could never forget. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers. You brought her back to me," he said in a broken voice. Clara shook her head. "I only found her. Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said, standing and walking toward her. "No one else did. People searched for years, but it was you. You saved her." Clara didn't know what to say. Her body was trembling, both from exhaustion and relief. "I just did what I thought was right," she murmured. Ethan's staff surrounded them, overjoyed. Cameras flashed as news reporters began arriving, but Ethan didn't care. He carried Amelia inside, still holding her hand tightly as if afraid she might disappear again. Inside the mansion, the air was filled with emotion. Every servant, every guard who had once searched for Amelia stood still, watching her walk through the halls like a lost angel finally home. Clara followed quietly. The sudden attention made her uncomfortable. She felt out of place in her worn dress and tired shoes, surrounded by marble floors and crystal lights. She didn't belong in this world. She was just a girl who had done what she could. Ethan turned to her again. "Please sit. You must be starving." Clara tried to smile but shook her head. "I'm fine, sir. I'm just glad she's safe." "You're more than fine," he said. "You're family now." But before Clara could answer, the room started spinning. Her vision blurred and the ground seemed to shift beneath her. The long days of hunger, fear, and sleepless nights had caught up to her. The last thing she saw was Amelia reaching out to her, calling her name before everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying in a soft bed, sunlight pouring through the window. A nurse stood beside her, smiling gently. "You're safe," the nurse said. "You fainted, but you'll be okay." Clara looked around in confusion. "Where's Amelia?" she asked. "She's with her father," the nurse said kindly. "They haven't left your side since you were brought here." As if on cue, the door opened and Ethan walked in with Amelia holding his hand. The little girl ran to the bed and hugged Clara tightly. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Don't leave me again." Clara smiled weakly, brushing her hair. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." Ethan stood beside them, emotion still raw in his voice. "Clara," he said softly, "you've given me back my life. I can never thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "You should thank your daughter. She's the brave one." Ethan's eyes glistened. "You're both brave. And from this day forward, you'll never be alone again." Clara didn't understand what he meant at first, but over the next few days, as she recovered, she saw the truth. Ethan had arranged for her to stay in the house as long as she wished. He told her she would continue her studies, have a home, and a family that cared for her. "You gave me back my child," he said simply. "Let me give you back your life." Clara tried to protest, but he wouldn't listen. Deep down, though, she knew that for the first time in years, she finally had a place where she belonged. At night, as she watched Amelia sleeping peacefully in her room, Clara felt tears run down her face. Not of sadness this time, but of quiet gratitude. She whispered to herself, "Mom, I think I finally did something right. Outside, the city lights shimmered, and in the big house that had once been filled with silence, laughter returned. The sound of a child's giggle echoed through the halls again, and the man who had lost everything found his heart once more. Clara didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was certain. Her journey had led her not only to save a lost child but to heal 2 broken souls, including her own. The days after the reunion passed like a dream. The big mansion that had once felt empty and cold was now filled with life again. Laughter echoed through the halls, and the sound of small feet running across marble floors brought warmth back into every corner. Ethan Langford often stopped what he was doing just to listen, to make sure it was real. For years that sound had been missing. Now it was everything to him. Clara was still recovering, but she was stronger every day. The color had returned to her cheeks, and there was light in her eyes again. The doctor said she only needed rest, proper meals, and peace of mind, things she had gone without for far too long. Ethan made sure she had all of it. He had a quiet room prepared for her near Amelia's, overlooking the garden. Fresh flowers were placed on her table every morning. A gentle warmth surrounded her life now, a kind she had never known before. Amelia visited her every morning. She would knock softly, peek through the door, and climb onto the bed with her favorite toy. "You have to get better," she would say, "because Daddy says you're part of the family now." Clara always smiled when she said that. She would hold Amelia close and whisper, "I'll always be here when you need me." Ethan often joined them in the evenings. They would sit together in the garden watching the sunset. Sometimes there was laughter, sometimes silence, but always peace, a kind of peace that didn't need words. One evening, Ethan turned to her. "Clara," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot lately. I spent years searching for my daughter and lost so much along the way. But you, a stranger, risked everything to bring her back. Why?" Clara looked down, thinking carefully. "Because I know what it feels like to lose someone," she said. "And I didn't want her to grow up alone like I did." Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. Ethan's eyes softened. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Someone who used to believe kindness could change the world. I lost that belief a long time ago. You brought it back." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe kindness is just something that never really goes away. It just waits for the right moment to return." That night, after Amelia fell asleep, Ethan went to his study. He looked through the old files and folders that had gathered dust, the missing child reports, the letters, the photographs. Then he opened a blank page in his notebook and began to write something new. The next morning, he called a meeting with his lawyers and advisors. They were used to seeing him as a businessman, but that day his tone was different. He told them he wanted to start a foundation, one that would help find missing children, support orphans, and give shelter to those who had nowhere else to go. They asked him what to name it. He didn't hesitate. "The Clara Foundation," he said. When he told her later, Clara was speechless. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "I do," Ethan replied. "You gave me back my daughter. The least I can do is make sure your kindness keeps changing lives."